A child goes to bed hungry tonight, not in some distant land, but right here in our own backyard. Another child wakes up tomorrow morning wondering if there will be breakfast. And another family makes the heartbreaking choice between paying rent or buying groceries. Now, I want you to hold on to that image, because what I'm about to share with you today isn't just another talk about poverty. It's about the power that lies within each of us to create profound change in our world. You see, we've been asking the wrong questions all along. We keep asking, how do we end poverty? When perhaps the real question should be, what if we're the ones standing in our own way? What if the end of poverty isn't just about money, resources, or policies, but about something far more fundamental, our mindset? I remember standing in line at a coffee shop some years ago. The person in front of me ordered their usual elaborate drink. You know, the kind with all the special instructions that take a minute just to say. Behind me was a woman counting coins, hoping she had enough for a simple cup of coffee to warm herself on a cold morning. In that moment, I witnessed 3 different worlds existing in the same 10 square feet of space. And hit me about the absence of money. It's about the presence of barriers in our minds. Think about this. How many times have you walked past someone in need and thought, someone should do something about that? That right there, that's the mindset we need to examine, because someone is you. Someone is me. Someone is every single person in this room right now. We've been conditioned to see poverty as an insurmountable mountain, a problem so vast that our individual actions couldn't possibly make a difference. But what if that very belief is the first barrier we need to break down? What if our collective hesitation, our collective someone else will handle it mentality, is actually the foundation that keeps poverty firmly in place? Let me share something powerful with you. Every major transformation in human history began with a shift in mindset. The abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, civil rights, these movements didn't start with perfect solutions. They started with people who dared to believe that change was possible and that they had a role to play in creating it. You might be thinking, but I'm just one person. What difference can I really make? And that's exactly where we need to start our journey today, because that thought, that seemingly innocent, realistic thought, is actually the first chain in a long line of mental barriers that keep us from taking action. When you throw a stone into a pond, you don't just create one ripple. You create countless ripples that extend far beyond your line of sight. Your actions, your choices, your mindset, they all create ripples that affect lives you may never see. Now, the question isn't whether you can make a difference. The question is whether you're willing to create that first ripple. We often think of poverty as something that happens to other people. But poverty isn't just about lacking money. It's about lacking opportunities, lacking connections, lacking the belief that things can be different. And here's the truth that might make some of us uncomfortable. Our mindset of separation, our belief that poverty is their problem and not our problem, is part of what keeps this cycle going. Let me tell you about a profound realization I had while visiting a community where poverty was prevalent. I went there thinking I was going to observe poverty, but what I actually observed was resilience, creativity, and untapped potential. I saw people with brilliant ideas, but no platform to share them. I saw natural leaders who lacked only the opportunity to lead. I saw entrepreneurs without capital, teachers without classrooms, healers without clinics. That's when it hit me. Poverty isn't just a lack of resources. It's a massive waste of human potential. Every mind we write off, every talent we leave undeveloped, every dream we allow to wither. That's not just a personal tragedy, it's a loss for all of humanity. The same mindset that can keep poverty in place can also be the key to dismantling it. When we shift from seeing poverty as an insurmountable problem to seeing it as a challenge we can tackle together, everything changes. When we move from that, just how things are, things can be different. And I can be part of that difference. We open up new possibilities. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about the opportunities you've had, the doors that opened for you, the people who believed in you when you needed it most. Now imagine if everyone had access to those same opportunities. Imagine if we could create a world where potential wasn't limited by postal code, where dreams weren't deferred because of empty bank accounts, where talent could flourish regardless of circumstance. But that's impossible, some might say. There will always be poverty, and there it is again, that limiting mindset that keeps us stuck. Because here's what we know. Poverty isn't natural. It's not a law of nature like gravity. It's a human-created condition. And what humans have created, humans can change. You see, every time we accept poverty is inevitable, we become complicit in its continuation. Every time we see it as their problem, rather than our challenge, we strengthen the barriers that keep it in place. Every time we think someone should do something, instead of I can do something, we miss an opportunity to create change. But what if we could shift that mindset? What if, instead of seeing poverty as a problem too big to solve, we saw it as a series of smaller challenges we could tackle together? What if, instead of waiting for someone else to make the first move, we became the first movers ourselves? This isn't about guilt. This isn't about shame. This is about possibility. This is about recognizing that we all have a role to play in creating a world where poverty becomes a chapter in history books rather than a daily reality for millions. Think about this. Every major innovation, every significant change, every step forward in human history started with someone saying, what if? What if we could fly? What if we could instantly communicate with someone on the other side of the world? What if we could cure diseases that once seemed incurable? And now, here we are, asking perhaps one of the most important what-if questions of our time. What if the end of poverty starts with our mindset? What if the first step toward ending poverty isn't a policy change or a donation, but a fundamental shift in how we think about our role in creating? You know, we often talk about abundance and scarcity, but have you ever noticed how these aren't just economic conditions, they're ways of thinking? When we operate from a scarcity mindset, we see limitations everywhere. We think there's not enough to go around. We hold tight to what we have, believing that giving means losing. But what if that very thinking is what creates scarcity in the first place? Let me share something profound with you. The universe itself operates on principles of abundance. Look at nature. A single seed doesn't just produce one fruit. It produces an entire tree that bears thousands of fruits, each containing more seeds. That's abundance thinking. That's the mindset we need to cultivate when we think about ending poverty. But here's where it gets really interesting, and maybe a bit uncomfortable. Our current mindset about poverty often comes from a place of fear. Fear that there isn't enough. Fear that helping others means having less for ourselves. Fear that poverty might somehow be contagious if we get too close to it. But what if we could transform that fear into faith? Faith in human potential. Faith in our collective ability to create change. Faith in the abundance that exists when we dare to share. Think about the air we breathe for a moment. Do you ever worry that taking a deep breath means someone else won't have enough air? Of course not. We understand intuitively that air is abundant. But somewhere along the way, we started thinking about opportunities, about resources, about potential in terms of scarcity rather than abundance. The scarcity mindset shows up in subtle ways. It's in the thought, I'd love to help, but I barely have enough for myself. It's in the belief that success is a zero-sum game that for someone to win, someone else must lose. It's in the way we sometimes hold back from sharing our knowledge, our connections, our resources, believing that doing so might somehow diminish us. There's the beautiful truth. So the more we share, the more we have. Knowledge share doesn't decrease, it multiplies. It multiplies. Opportunities created don't diminish, they expand. When we lift others up, we all rise higher. This isn't just feel-good philosophy. It's practical reality. Every time we help someone escape poverty, we're not just changing one life. We're changing the lives of their children, their community, and generations to come. We're unleashing potential that can solve problems we haven't even imagined yet. We're creating new markets, new ideas, new possibilities. Poverty isn't just a moral challenge. It's a waste of human potential on a massive scale. But to tap into this potential, we need to shift our mindset about what's possible. We need to move from either for thinking to both and thinking. It's not either prosperity for me or help for others. It can be both. It's not either maintaining my comfort or creating change. It can be both. It's not either personal success or social impact. It can be, must be both. This shift in mindset changes everything. When we start seeing with eyes of abundance rather than scarcity, we stop asking, what can I afford to give? And start asking, what can I not afford to waste? We stop seeing poverty as a drain on resources and start seeing it as an opportunity to unleash human potential. Think about the greatest innovations in human history. Many of them came from people trying to solve problems, trying to meet needs, trying to create possibilities where none seem to exist. What if poverty is actually one of our greatest opportunities for innovation? What if the solutions we develop to address poverty could lead to breakthroughs that benefit everyone? But this requires us to challenge some deeply held beliefs. We need to question the assumption that poverty is someone else's problem. We need to challenge the belief that our individual actions don't matter. We need to examine the mindset that says change is impossible. Have you ever achieved anything significant without first believing it was possible? Has any great change in history ever occurred without people first believing it could happen? Our beliefs shape our actions, and our actions shape our reality. This is where personal responsibility meets collective possibility. Yes, poverty is a systemic issue. Yes, it requires policy changes and institutional reforms. But it also requires each of us to examine and shift our own mindset, because systems are made up of people, and people are driven by mindsets. When we shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance, from separation to connection, from helplessness to possibility, we start seeing opportunities everywhere. We start noticing the ways we can make a difference, no matter how small they might seem at first. Remember that ripple effect we talked about earlier? Well, here's another way to think about it. Every mindset shift creates a ripple effect too. When you start believing in abundance, you act differently. When you act differently, you influence others. When others are influenced, they start changing too before you know it. What started as a personal shift in mindset becomes a collective movement for change. But this isn't just about positive thinking. And this is about positive action rooted in a new way of seeing. It's about understanding that our mindset isn't just a private matter. It's a force that shapes the world around us. When we believe in scarcity, we create systems that perpetuate scarcity. When we believe in abundance, we create systems that generate abundance. Think about education for a moment. When we operate from a scarcity mindset, we might think, why invest in educating people in poverty? There aren't enough jobs anyway. But when we shift to an abundance mindset, we realize that educated minds create new opportunities, new jobs, new solutions. Every mind we enlighten becomes a potential source of innovation, creativity, and positive change. The same principle applies to entrepreneurship, to healthcare, to housing, to every aspect of addressing poverty. When we shift from seeing these as costs to seeing them as investments in human potential, everything changes. When we move from seeing people in poverty as burdens to seeing them as bearers of untapped potential, we start creating different solutions. How do we turn this mindset into tangible action? How do we move from understanding to doing? Because understanding without action is merely philosophy, and action without understanding often misses the mark entirely. Let me share something powerful with you. Every single person in this room has something unique to contribute to ending poverty. Every single one of you has experiences, insights, connections, or resources that, when activated with the right mindset, the question isn't whether you have something to contribute. It's whether you're ready to discover what that contribution might be. Think about your daily life for a moment. Every day, you make dozens of decisions that seem small and insignificant. Where you shop, what you buy, how you treat people, who you connect with, what you keep to yourself. Now imagine if each of those decisions was informed by an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Imagine if each choice was made with the consciousness that you're not just deciding for yourself, you're participating in shaping the world we all share. This is where real transformation begins. It starts with simple questions we ask ourselves. When I succeed, who can I bring along with me? When I learn something valuable, who else needs to hear this? When I have an opportunity, How can I multiply it rather than monopolize it? But let's be even more specific. Let's talk about what this mindset shift looks like in practice. When you see someone struggling, instead of thinking, that's unfortunate, you might ask, what potential lies dormant here? Instead of seeing a problem to avoid, you see an opportunity to engage. Instead of thinking, someone should do something about this, you think, what's the first small step I can take? Here's a truth that might challenge you, May. Poverty doesn't end with grand gestures. It ends with millions of small actions taken consistently by people who believe that every action matters. It ends with people who understand that changing the world isn't about doing everything. It's about doing something and doing it with the right mindset. Consider your own skills and resources. Maybe you're good at teaching. What if that gift could help someone develop skills they need to break the cycle of poverty? Maybe you're good at business. What if those skills could help someone start a sustainable enterprise? Maybe you're good at connecting people. What if those connections could create opportunities for those who lack them? We wait until we have everything figured out before we take action. We wait until we have the perfect plan, the complete solution, the guaranteed outcome. And in that waiting, opportunities pass us by. The mindset shift we need is from, I'll help when I have it all figured out, to I'll figure it out as I help. Think about this. Every major movement for social change started with imperfect action taken by imperfect people who simply decided to begin. They didn't wait for perfect conditions. They didn't wait until they had all the answers. They started where they were, with what they had, and grew into their impact. This is where courage meets conviction. It's where our understanding of abundance meets our willingness to act. Because here's the truth. The opposite of poverty isn't wealth, it's justice. And justice begins with recognizing our interconnectedness, our shared humanity, and our individual power to create change. But we shift our mindset about poverty. We don't just change how we see poverty. We change how we see ourselves. We move from being passive observers to active participants in creating change. We move from feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the problem to being energized by the possibilities for solution. But this shift requires something from us. It requires us to get uncomfortable. Growth happens at the edge of comfort, and meaningful change rarely comes from staying in our comfort zones. When we truly embrace an abundance mindset, we're called to act in ways that might feel challenging at first. Think about the barriers that exist in your own mind right now. What stories do you tell yourself about why you can't make a difference? What beliefs do you hold about what's possible or impossible? What fears keep you from taking action? These are the real barriers we need to address, because once we shift these internal barriers, the external barriers begin to fall away. This isn't about guilt or shame. It's about possibility and potential. It's about recognizing that every one of us has the power to be a catalyst for change. Every one of us has the ability to create ripples that become waves of transformation. Every person who has ever escaped poverty did so because someone, or many someones, believed in their potential. Someone saw past their current circumstances to their inherent possibilities. Someone operated from an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. What if we could multiply that effect? What if we could create a culture where believing in people's potential becomes the norm rather than the exception? What if we could build communities where opportunity flows as freely as air, where potential is nurtured as naturally as plants in a garden? This is where your mindset shift becomes a catalyst for collective transformation. When you begin to operate from abundance, you give others permission to do the same. When you begin to see possibilities instead of problems, you help others expand their vision too. When you take action from a place of hope rather than fear, you inspire others to do the same. This isn't about magical thinking. This is about practical magic, the kind that happens when we combine a powerful mindset with purposeful action. It's about understanding that while mindset alone won't end poverty, poverty cannot end without a fundamental shift in how we think about it, talk about it, and act. Think about the legacy you want to leave. Think about the world you want to create. Think about the impact you want to have. Now consider this. What if the only thing standing between that vision and reality is the limitations in your own mind? What if the biggest barrier to creating change isn't out there in the world, but in here, in our thoughts and beliefs about what's possible Now let's talk about something truly extraordinary, the power of collective consciousness. Because when enough people shift their mindsets, something magical happens. Individual changes become collective transformation. Personal shifts become cultural evolution. Single actions multiply into movements. Think about this. Every major shift in human history started with a change in how people thought about what was possible. Before the first airplane flew, most people believed human flight was impossible. Before the first satellite launched, most people thought space was unreachable. Before the first computer network connected, most people couldn't imagine a world where instant global communication was normal. And here we are today, standing at another threshold of possibility. We're not just talking about ending poverty. We're talking about fundamentally reimagining how human society works. We're talking about creating a world where every person has the opportunity to fulfill their potential, where abundance flows naturally, where humanity's collective genius is fully unleashed. But here's the beautiful paradox. This massive transformation begins with the smallest of shifts, the moment when one person decides to think differently, the moment when you decide to see possibility where others see problems, the moment when you choose abundance over scarcity, connection over separation, action over apathy. When we change how we think about poverty, we change how we think about everything. We start seeing connections where we once saw separation. We start seeing opportunities where we once saw obstacles. We start seeing solutions where we once saw only problems. Think about your own journey for a moment. Think about times in your life when a shift in your thinking created a completely different reality. Maybe it was in your career, your relationships, your personal growth. Remember how that one shift in perspective changed everything that came after it? Now imagine that same transformative power applied to how we think about poverty. Imagine what becomes possible when we stop seeing poverty as a problem to manage and start seeing it as an opportunity to unleash human potential. Imagine what changes when we stop asking, how much will this cost? And start asking, how much are we losing by not investing in human potential? This is where individual mindset shifts create collective impact. When you change how you think about poverty, you change how you act. When you change how you act, you influence others. When others are influenced, they begin to shift too. Before you know it, what started as a personal transformation becomes a catalyst for social change. But here's where it gets really interesting. As more people shift their mindset, new possibilities emerge that weren't visible before. Solutions appear that we couldn't see when we were stuck in old ways of thinking. Opportunities arise that were hidden by our limited perspectives. Think about this. Every person lifted out of poverty becomes a potential solution creator for others. Every mind unleashed from the constraints of survival becomes free to innovate, to create. Every life transformed becomes a beacon of possibility for others. This is the exponential power of collective mindset shift. It's not just about adding up individual changes. It's about creating a completely new field of possibility. It's about reaching critical mass, where new ways of thinking become the norm rather than the exception. But let's be clear about something. This isn't about waiting for everyone else to change first. This isn't about needing a majority before we take action. This is about understanding that every mindset shift matters, that every person who chooses to think differently adds momentum to the transformation. Research shows that when just 10% of a population adopts a new belief or behavior, it creates a tipping point where change becomes almost inevitable. Think about that. We don't need everyone to shift their mindset at once. We just need enough people committed to thinking and acting differently. This is where your individual commitment becomes part of something much larger. When you choose to see abundance instead of scarcity, you're not just changing your own perspective. You're contributing to a field of possibility that affects everyone around you. When you choose to act from a place of possibility, rather than limitation, you're not just changing your own behavior, you're creating new patterns that others can follow. The collective transformation doesn't happen automatically. It happens through conscious choice, through deliberate action, through consistent commitment to seeing and doing things differently. It happens when enough people decide that the old ways of thinking about poverty are no longer acceptable. Think about the conversations you have, the decisions you make, the actions you take. Each one is an opportunity to embody this new mindset, to demonstrate what's possible when we think differently about poverty and potential. Each one is a chance to influence the collective consciousness in a positive direction. This is where leadership meets possibility. Because leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking better questions. It's not about knowing exactly how to end poverty, it's about being willing to explore new possibilities. It's not about having perfect solutions. It's about being committed to finding better ways. Consider the ripple effects of your leadership in this area. When you choose to think and act differently about poverty, you give others permission to do the same. When you demonstrate what's possible through your actions, you create new reference points for what others believe is achievable. And you share your journey of mindset transformation, you create pathways for others to follow. But perhaps most importantly, when we shift our collective mindset about poverty, we begin to see each other differently. We move from seeing people in poverty as problems to be solved to seeing them as potential waiting to be unleashed. We move from seeing ourselves as helpless observers to seeing ourselves as active participants in creating change. This is where hope meets reality. Because hope isn't about passive optimism, it's about active possibility. It's about seeing what could be and being willing to work toward it even when the path isn't clear. It's about understanding that our thoughts create our reality and choosing thoughts that create the reality we want to see. As we come to this final moment together, I want you to feel the weight of possibility that sits in this room right now. Feel the potential for transformation that exists, not just in your mind, but in your heart, in your hands, in your choices. Because what we're talking about isn't just ending poverty. We're talking about unleashing the full potential of humanity. Think about this. Every great journey of transformation begins with a moment of decision, a moment when someone chooses to see things differently, a moment when someone decides that the old way of thinking no longer serves the future. This is your moment. The question isn't whether we can end poverty. The question is whether we're willing to think differently enough to make it happen. Because the solutions we need won't come from the same mindset that created the problems in the first place. They'll come from people like you, who dare to think differently, who dare to see possibility where others see problems, who dare to act when others wait. Let me share one final truth with you. The end of poverty isn't just about creating a world where everyone has enough. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to contribute their unique. It's about understanding that poverty isn't just a waste of resources. It's a waste of human potential on a scale that we can no longer afford. Think about the innovations we're missing out on because brilliant minds are trapped in survival mode. Think about the solutions we're not seeing because potential problem solvers are struggling to meet basic needs. Think about the beauty, the art, the music, the ideas we're losing because creativity is stifled by scarcity. But here's the exciting part. You have the power to change this. Not someday, not when everything is perfect, not when you have it all figured out, but right now, today, in this moment, because the mindset shift we're talking about doesn't require permission, doesn't need funding, doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It starts with a decision, your decision to think differently. What if the person who holds the key to solving one of humanity's greatest challenges is alive right now, but trapped in poverty? What if the mind that could conceive of the next great leap forward for humanity exists today, but can't access the education they need? What if the leader who could unite and inspire millions is out there right now, but their voice is silenced by circumstance? This is why your mindset shift matters. This is why your actions matter. This is why every step you take toward thinking and acting differently about poverty creates ripples that can transform lives you may never see. Because when you shift your mindset from scarcity to abundance, from separation to connection, from helplessness to possibility, you don't just change your own life. You help create the conditions for others to transform their lives too. But let's be absolutely clear about something. This isn't about feeling guilty. This isn't about shame. This isn't about blame. This is about possibility. This is about the power that exists in this room right now to begin creating different outcomes. Think about tomorrow morning. When you wake up, you'll have a choice. You can continue thinking about poverty the way you always have, or you can choose to see it differently. You can continue acting the way you always have, or you can choose to act differently. You can continue waiting for someone else to create change, or you could become the change maker you've been waiting for. As with us too, what I want to say, believer, major transformation in human history seemed impossible until it was inevitable. The end of slavery seemed impossible until it wasn't. Universal education seemed impossible until it wasn't. Civil rights seemed impossible until they weren't. And the end of poverty might seem impossible now until it isn't. You are not powerless. You are not helpless. You are not a passive observer in this great human drama. You are a creator, a change maker, a possibility thinker. And when you embrace this truth, when you really let it sink into your bones, everything changes. So now. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect, but now. Start with your next thought. Start with your next decision. Start with your next action. Let every choice you make be informed by this new mindset we've explored together. What's one thing I can do differently tomorrow because of this new way of thinking? What's one action I can take that embodies this shift from scarcity to abundance? What's one step I can take toward creating the change I want to see? Then the poverty starts with a mindset shift, but it doesn't end there. It continues with action. It grows through commitment. It spreads through influence, and it transforms through persistence. You might be thinking, but what if I fail? What if my efforts don't make a difference? What if things don't change? And to that, I say, what if you succeed? What if your efforts create ripples that transform lives? What if your actions inspire others to act too? What if your commitment becomes the catalyst for change that others have been waiting for? The only real failure is the failure to try. The only real waste is the waste of potential. The only real loss is the loss of possibility that comes from thinking too small, from staying too safe, from waiting too long to act. As you leave this room today, carry with you this understanding. You are not just an observer in the story of ending poverty, you are a protagonist. Your mindset matters. Your actions matter. Your commitment matters. And the world is waiting for you to embrace this truth and act on it. What if the end of poverty starts with our mindset? What if the transformation we've been waiting for begins with the person you see in the mirror? What if the power to create change has been within you all along, just waiting for this moment of recognition? The future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create together. Thought by thought, choice by choice, action by action. And it begins now with your decision to think differently, to see differently, to act differently. The question isn't whether we can end poverty. The question is, are you ready to be part of the transformation? Are you ready to think differently enough to make it happen? Are you ready to act boldly enough to create change? Because the world doesn't change when we wait for others to act. The world changes when we decide to become the change makers we've been waiting for, and that journey begins now with you, with this moment, with your next thought, your next choice, your next action. The future is calling. How will you answer?